all-out war has erupted in regard to this commandment. It's caused more debate, more controversy, more division, and even persecution. And again, I tell you, if I knew nothing else about what was going on, and I was on the outside looking in at Christianity and what was going on with the Sabbath, it would be enough for me to say, for whatever reason, the devil has this thing in his crosshairs. Why has this been the subject of so much debate? Why have Christians throughout the centuries clung to it and said, no, we need to keep this commandment of God. We need to fear God. And why do we have other Christians saying, no, you actually need to reject it, or you're rejecting Christ? You're not serving him. You're putting yourself under bondage. Today, we're going to kind of do a little bit of Sabbath apologetics, if you will, specifically in regard to one passage found in the New Testament. It's a passage that Paul brings to the table to the Romans. And it really serves as a premier defense for those Christians that want to come out and say, guess what? You as a Christian, you are not obligated to keep the Sabbath. And that passage I'm talking about is found in Romans chapter 14, verse 5. And this is what we read. One person esteems one day above another. Another esteems every day alike. Let each be fully convinced in his own mind. He who observes the day observes it to the Lord. And he who does not observe the day to the Lord, he does not observe it. Traditionally speaking, this is a passage that many Christians will take you to say, don't make a big deal out of this. If I want to keep it, I can. If I don't want to keep it, not a big deal. A lot of people get very, very creative in those moments, just at extracting one particular verse and creating an entire doctrine and theology out of it. So lest we do that, what do we need to do? We need to get some context. Good biblical exegesis will look at the broader context. Good biblical exegesis will look at the historical context. And so we're going to get into good biblical exegesis. And the first thing is, let's get some context. And to do this, we got to go back to verse 1. And so in verse 1, we read the following. Receive one who is weak in the faith. Now pay close attention. One particular group is in mind here, at least for now, in regard to Paul. And he's given this particular group instructions. They're instructions. And what particular group am I talking about? I'm talking about those who are strong in the faith. They are developed in the faith. They are mature in the faith. They've been tested. Paul instructs them to receive one who is weak in the faith. To be weak in the faith, that means you're underdeveloped. You're not mature in the faith. Now, he goes on and he says this, but not to disputes over doubtful things. You look at this in the Greek, and a better way to say this would be the following. Don't bring harmful judgment upon their opinions. Watch yourselves. Use the discernment that God's given you. Be careful on how you're responding to the weak in faith. Well, now I ask the question, what is going on here? In Romans 14, why is it necessary to bring these instructions to the strong in the faith? He tells us in verse 2, check this out. For one believes he may eat all things, but he who is weak eats only vegetables. Okay, so let's dissect this. One believes, who is he talking about? The strong. The strong believes they can eat all things. So what does he mean by all things? It means they're omnivores. They're comfortable eating meat and vegetables. The whole diet is all good. The weak and undeveloped in the faith, they don't believe that. It has nothing to do with health. Nothing. And if you don't get that component, if you're trying to read this through the lens of what you're experiencing today in this modern America, you're going to totally miss the whole thing. This has everything to do with spiritual context. The reason these vegetarians are withholding from meat is because they see this in a spiritual context as something that could be their demise. I want you to understand something. Before we go further, in paganism, there were some pagans that very much, to venerate their gods as an act and an expression of their worship and adoration to their fake gods, they abstained from eating meat. Now I ask you, let's get back into the first century in the historical context, and we look at the reality of what is happening at that time. The gospel of Yeshua, a Jewish Messiah who came to Israel, is now, through Messianic Jews, being spread throughout the world to who? Pagans, some of which absolutely clung to their vegetables. Breaking new ground, verse 3. Let not him who eats despise him who does not eat. Again, who's he instructing? He's instructing the mature, the learned, the well-versed in the Word of God. He's instructing the strong in the faith, and specifically telling them, don't fall into the trap of despising your weak brother. Don't do that. And then he moves to instruct the weak in the faith. This is what he says. And let not him who does not eat judge him who eats, for God has received him. I want to ask a question. In regard to eating meat, is there anything prohibiting in the Torah from people eating as much meat as they want? No, nothing, not at all. Let's jump to the other side for a second. Is there anything prohibiting those who are weak in the faith from not eating meat? Were people commanded, no, you have to eat every day? Do you find anything like that in the Torah? No. There's one exception for your general public. It would be the Passover itself. The Passover itself. Other than that, nobody's commanded to eat meat. So think about this situation. This is what's important. On one hand, you have those who eat as much meat as their heart desires. Nothing prohibited in the Torah. In other words, no sin. On the other hand, is the fact that you want to abstain from meat. Well, with all due respect, that's not sin in and of itself. You understand the situation? The dialogue in Romans 14 would be radically different if there was sin in the camp. Now, you can talk about the motives for abstaining from meat, and Paul does address this. You'll see this. You can talk about the motives, and we can say, well, there's some growth that needs to happen here. But these people abstaining from meat is not sin. Now, continuing on in verse 4. And this is to the weak in faith. Who are you to judge another servant? To his own master he stands or falls. Indeed, he will be made to stand, for God is able to make him stand. It's interesting. Paul takes a very strong position against the weak in faith and gives a very strong warning. Don't you judge them because they're eating meat. It's not sin. Check yourselves. Watch yourselves in this matter. And then we get to our passage in question. The passage reads, one person esteems one day above another, another esteems every day alike. Let each be fully convinced in his own mind. This is the passage that today, from pulpits all across the world, that they're going to come out and say, see, this is proof. This is the proof text that Christians don't need to keep the Sabbath. What is the problem with that interpretation? Number one, please look at the passage carefully. Where do you even find the word Sabbath or any variation thereof? Do you see seventh day or Sabbath rest? Any idea of Sabbath? The word, it doesn't exist. It does not exist. That's the first problem. The second problem is context. What is the context? And again, I'm going to say this. Romans 14, from beginning to end, and even going into 15, Paul doesn't even take a breath. It is all about food, eating and not eating. Period. Again, since the very subject of foods to which Paul made reference in verses 2 through 4, this scholar recognizes this is about food, brings up that of fasting. It has been suggested that the apostle is here referring to days of fasting after the manner indicated in Luke 18:12. And I'm going to tell you, he's absolutely right. He's not the only scholar declaring this. There are scholars that are looking at this and they recognize the context is about food, and the only thing that Paul could really be talking about is fasting. And I'm going to tell you right now, absolutely fundamentally correct. Fasting, when you fast, you esteem the day. It is not the day you get to go golfing. It's not the day you go to the gym. It's the day you humble yourself before the Lord. So very much it is your observance to the Lord. It is very special when you fast. Okay? But because I am fasting and you're not, look at what Paul is talking about. One person observes it one day, another person every day. Like, you may not fast at all, while I fast twice a week. Should there be judgment passed going back and forth? And I want you to understand, this was a real thing. This was ingrained in the faith early on. Here's my point. The question becomes, Paul's talking about this whole issue of eating and not eating, meat and vegetables. Look at the brilliance of the Apostle Paul and what he does. To help them understand his point, he brings something tangible to every one of them. This is mind-blowing. He brings something that they can all hold on in regard to those who fast and those who don't. And we know nothing, just like this issue over here between your meatitarians and your vegetarians, there is nothing in Torah on either side of this prohibiting or forcing them to fast. And isn't that interesting? This is a situation where he's bringing it on the table and say, look at the fasting. There's not to be any judgment in fasting, whether you fast or don't fast. Therefore, learn from that and understand there should be no judgment in regard to you if you want to eat meat or if you don't.
Hey there, this is Mike at Corner Fringe Ministries, and I'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch our video. We hope that it blessed you and it encouraged you. And if it did, please hit the thumbs up on the video and share it with your friends and family. It's also, if you haven't already considered, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Now, if you'd like to watch the entire video, click on this link. And if you'd like to watch the entire series and learn more about what we do and believe here at Corner Fringe Ministries, click on this link. Once again, I'd like to thank you for watching the video, and we hope to see you again soon. Shalom.